Greetings, beloved. It's always great to be back with you for another episode of the Sunday School Update. We're going to be looking at Psalm 75 this week as we continue our trek through the Psalms of Asaph for the winter quarter in our Sunday School curriculum. This is going to be, and has been, a little bit different for us as we've moved from narrative of walking through the story of the resurrection narrative in Mark, and now moving into poetry, wisdom literature, different genre for us. So I hope it's been fruitful for you as you have begun to look at the Psalms, as we've been reminded about the covenant, and especially in being in book 3 of the Psalms is that reminder of the covenant promises of God. Has God forgotten his covenant that he made with David and subsequently has made with Abraham? That he's going to have a king upon his throne who's going to rule and reign forever. We saw in the previous Psalms how there has been, in Psalm 74, destruction has come in. We've had the destruction of the temple, the sanctuary, the enemy has moved in, and now what has happened to God's covenant people is ultimately they're going to be led into exile. Well, here in Psalm 75, again, a psalm of Asaph, don't believe to be written by Asaph, maybe one of his contemporaries, but dedicated to him. We're reminded of not only God's covenant promises, that he will be the final judge, he will redeem his people, but there's even praise given by the psalmist. And so we're going to walk in this psalm today, 10 verses, again, a little bit shorter than the previous psalms. But we're going to do this a little differently. Today I want to just read through the psalm in its entirety, and as we do, make some points of observation, write down some repetitive words, look at some repetitive themes, talk about those briefly, and then kind of give some points of summation. And just as a reminder about how we're to go through into our time of Bible study of observation, interpretation, and application. So let's jump into Psalm chapter 75 today. One of the first things that you'll notice that I want to point out to you is it does begin by saying to the choir master, according to do not destroy. A psalm of Asaph, a song. Remember, these are to be sung. Your author even gives a website. I don't know if it's in the learner guide, but it is in the leader guide of going to a website where you can put together tunes with psalms, and I would encourage you to do that. I hope to in the future begin to introduce some psalms, whether it be on Sunday nights or with our choir or even congregationally, of where we begin to sing some psalms. But part of that is a lot of the tunes are unfamiliar to us. And when we look at the first part of the psalm where it says, according to do not destroy, that is actually a tune reference. And so it would be the equivalent of what we have done in the past with certain hymns. So like sometimes we sing, and we're actually going to sing it in January, the hymn, I Lay My Sins on Jesus. Well, that is to the tune of the church's one foundation. And so the Psalms often work very similarly. They would have taken a familiar tune at the time and placed the psalm to that tune so it would have been familiar to the people. Just a note of that. All right, let's go to the Psalms here. Psalm chapter 75. And what I'm going to attempt to do is to work our way through the psalm itself very quickly, to look at some points of repetition and to kind of get some themes among our divisions. So again, let me point out to you right here, according to do not destroy. So this would have been the tune that the psalm would have been sung to. This tune is not really familiar to us offhand, but it would have been to those at the time. Psalm of Asaph, again, not this particular psalm is not believed to be written by Asaph, one of his contemporaries and dedicated to him, but definitely someone who would have been a song leader in the temple. Now we begin in a very different note than what has begun over the previous two psalms, and that is with a note of thanks. Look where he says, we give thanks to you, O God. We give thanks for your name is near. We recount your wondrous deeds. Notice some repetition right off the bat. We have we being repetitive, and we have a giving of thanks. Okay, so this is praiseworthy. Thanks to whom or to? Thanks to God. Thanks for his deeds. So the works of God. We are remembering these things. And so there is our focus for this section. If you want to, again, divide these Psalms up into sections, this is what we have for the first one. Let's continue on. It says, at the set time that I appoint, let me scroll down just a minute to put our section together. At the set time that I appoint, I will judge with equity. When the earth totters and all its inhabitants, it is I who keep steady its pillars. Selah. Remember we said this term is could be an interlude, but nonetheless it is a time for meditation upon what has already been spoken. Notice the quotes that are here. This is going to be God speaking. We have this here in 2, coming all the way down to 5. All right. He says, I say to the boastful, do not boast. To the wicked, do not lift up your horn. Do not lift up your horn on high, or speak with haughty neck. So right off the bat, a couple of repetitions. Horn. What else do you see in there as you're looking through that text? Of course, we see I several times in reference to God, him speaking. We have a reference that's going to come into play in just a little while of judgment and the wicked. Okay. All right, we'll scroll down just a little bit more. Looking at verses 6 through 8. If I can get them all on here, I'll try. I think we got pretty close. For not from the east or from the west, and not from the wilderness comes lifting up, but it is God who executes judgment, putting down one and lifting up another. For in the hand of the Lord there is a cup with foaming wine well mixed, and he pours out from it, and all the wicked of the earth shall drain it down to the dregs. Again, you have the wicked. You have this idea of a lifting up. Lifting up what? Lifting up a horn, which is mentioned earlier, but you have lifting up mentioned several times there. You also have judgment again. So I'm just kind of demonstrating some things that I do in my study, and I would encourage you to do as well, just to grasp these points of observation, these repetitive words and ideas from the text. Okay, a little bit more. Again, we have wicked mentioned, of the earth. So the word's not one of repetition, but one of theme. So here we have east or west, but here we have of the earth. So we have made mention there. We have this idea of cup and wine well mixed and pouring, and then draining it down. So this really verse 8 itself is one theme in terms of the action of God and what is happening here. All right, let's move on. Some of the videos in the past have been a little lengthy, so I'm going to try to make this one a little shorter today. Now look at verse 9 and 10. He says, but I will declare it forever. Now, I believe that we have moved back to the psalmist, and this is not so much God speaking. Again, I'm going to bring verse 8 back into our view here. This is more of the psalmist speaking. And even here in verses 9 through 10, your author kind of makes mention that this could quite possibly be God. Here, I'm going to say it's still the psalmist in concluding the psalm, and I'll tell you why in just a minute. Again, let's not forget that we always have in mind the king, even though the king is not directly mentioned. We are in a state of exaltation. We're in a state of praise because the judge is going to judge rightly. Now I'm getting into interpretation a little bit, so I need to back up. Let's finish here in verse 9 and 10 with our observation. It says, I will declare it forever. I will sing praises to the God of Jacob. So this brings us all the way back to verse 1 of this idea of praise. Okay, he says, all the horns of the wicked I will cut off. So we've had horns mentioned several times. There's wicked. We've had wicked mentioned again. But the horns of the righteous shall be lifted up. There's the word lifted again. So we have several themes that are being displayed to us. Let's talk about those for just a moment. As I'm going to scroll back up and then we'll go through the text one more time. But we'll talk about those themes for just a minute in terms of what we have discovered. So you have this idea of beginning with praise. Again, much different than the previous Psalms, but it does help us to indicate a little pattern, because remember, these Psalms have been placed together for a specific purpose. And so we're beginning to walk through. Has God abandoned his covenant? Has God abandoned his covenant people? Well, it seemed like that way for a while, but now as we move into 75, it seems like the tide is turning here, that God is going to act in judgment against his enemies. And in so doing, we give thanks. We give praise for that. We recount the wondrous deeds and the things that God has done for us in the past. And what is it that God is going to do for us here in the near future? Or what is he going to do? He's going to have an appointed time of judgment. Here's where we get this reminder from all the way from Psalm chapter 1 of this righteous and wicked, and that God is going to be the final judge of all things. And he is going to judge rightly. And the psalmist mentions in verse 2, he's going to judge with equity. How can he be the one to do that? Because he is the God who is above all. He is the God who, when the earth totters and when things seem to become unsteady, it is God who is keeping steady its pillars. It is God who is sustaining not only life, not only things upon the earth, but it is God who is sustaining the earth itself. And he alone is the righteous judge. And so in so doing, and in so being that righteous judge, he encourages and says, do not boast, do not be prideful. To the wicked, do not lift up your horn against me. Now your author gives the picture there of that being the animals, or an animal who's preparing for battle, expressing its strength by the use of its horn. So do not he encourages the wicked, do not come against me in strength. Do not lift up your horn on high or speak with haughty neck. Now, I've also read one commentary where this idea of the horn could be in reference to animals expressing strength. It could be in reference to a pagan religion which had a certain headdress that included a horn, but in order for the horn not to fall off, it required for the neck to be straight and for the head to be held high. So it is a haughtiness, it is a pridefulness that is being displayed before the Lord, and the Lord is saying, don't do that. Don't come at me with pride. Don't come at me with a boastful attitude. You will be judged. You will be laid low. And so that moves us on there down to verse 5 and 6, where we're reminded that that judgment ultimately comes from the Lord, that that victory is not going to come from the east or the west. It's not going to come from the wilderness lifting up its horn, lifting up its strength. No, but it is God who executes judgment. It is God who's going to do that, and God is going to do so rightly. Another word would be perfectly. And so, again, that always kicks us back to verse 1 of that this is why we are giving praise to the Lord. So, again, much different. Remember that some of the questions that were asked in 73 and 74, has God gone silent? Is God not going to say anything? He's not going to do anything? Even, I think it was in 74, arise, O Lord, do something, wake up is even the terminology there. And here we have a complete settled argument. It is God who is the judge. He is the one who's going to execute it. You're not going to lift up your strength against him. He is going to be the victor. So that even brings us over into 8, where how is this judgment? What's this judgment going to look like? For in the hand of the Lord there is a cup. Now this is, we see this cup of God's wrath as it is often mentioned. The author does a great job in explanation of this. He even mentions Revelation 14, that the final judgment is going to be pictured of the cup of God's wrath being poured out, being overflowed. It's going to drain it down. Here the psalmist mentions this cup. Again, Old Testament imagery that we see, Old Testament language that we see in Revelation. So we got to have an understanding of the Old Testament to understand Revelation. Just as a side note, if and when we do get there, which we will at some point. But he says that this cup is going to be foaming wine, well mixed, which means it's not something that you're going to want to drink. It's going to be bitter. It's not going to be sweet, and it's going to be poured out. Drain it down to the dregs. He speaks of this as the wicked. The wicked are going to consume this. They're going to be, how can I picture it for you? They're going to be, well, in the picture of wine, they're going to be drunk because the wine is going to be poured out. And what is the wine? It's the wrath of the Lord. It's going to be poured out to where there is none left, down to the dregs. They're going to be drunk on the wrath of the Lord. In other words, fully, and what do we mean by the term drunk? Fully consumed by it. Fully under its control of the wrath of God being poured out upon them. It's a horrendous picture for us, and ultimately a horrific thought of the wrath of God. But again, beloved, we have to end like the psalmist does, and even like the book of Revelation does. For those in Christ, it is a great comfort, because God is going to judge the wickedness and going to judge rightly. And so this is how the psalmist ends in verses 9 and 10. He says, but I will declare it forever. I will sing praises to the God of Jacob. Now pause for just a minute. Don't miss that. That is covenant language. That takes us all the way back to Genesis. Genesis 12, the Abrahamic covenant, described as the covenant of grace. God has a people for himself, and he is in covenant with them. Again, this is the purpose of the psalm, the theme of the psalm. Has God forgotten his covenant? No, he has not. The righteous king is going to come. He's going to judge the righteous and the wicked, and the righteous he's going to set upon high, and the wicked he's going to pour out his wrath forever upon them. And so what's the conclusion? Not only do we sing the praises to the God of Jacob, but in verse 10, I mentioned that I'm not sure that that's the Lord speaking. I almost believe it is the king speaking, which ultimately, yes, is going to be the Lord. But But again, the Psalms are written for the king in this case. So it's the king proclaiming, all the horns of the wicked I will cut off. So he's joining in this defeat. He says, all the horns of the wicked I will cut off, but the horns of the righteous shall be lifted up. If you'll remember, we were just so concerned a couple Psalms back about the enemy and how it seemed that the enemy was defeating us and winning. Well, now we have praise. Why? Because the righteous judge has acted, and we even join in that celebration that all of the wicked will be cut off. All of the righteous shall be lifted up on high. So what do we get from that? Justice will be done. Justice will be served, and will be served rightly by whom? The judge, the Lord who is upon high. He will assert his rule over all. And what a comfort that should be for us. It was a comfort for the psalmist. It was such a comfort that the psalmist even begins the psalm by saying, we give thanks to you, O God. We give thanks to your name. We give thanks for your name is near us. You are near us. And what do? We recount, we remember your wondrous deeds and give you thanks, give you praise for that. So this is a great psalm. Again, just 10 short verses there, but just a wealth of knowledge for us to meditate and think upon. And so I would encourage you to do that. Take some time, observe the text, walk through it, look for the different themes that emerge, and then begin your interpretation. And then from there, pull out your application from the text so that you can then share that with your family, but also share it with your faith family in our time of Sunday school together. All right, beloved. Well, I did want to intentionally make this video a little bit shorter today. I pray that you take this study and share it with someone else. But also want to wish you a very Merry Christmas. Next week we won't have a video, even though we'll continue in our Psalms of Asaph. Or I don't plan to. You never know. May get one pulled off. But look forward to meeting with you this coming Lord's Day, and not only celebrating the season of Advent as we are celebrating the birth of our Lord and Savior, but also a reminder of celebration of the righteous judge here in this Psalm of Asaph. So hope you have a wonderful weekend. Take care. God bless. And I look forward to seeing you this coming Lord's Day.